if anybody's going to facilitate, it's going to be him. Hi, Priscilla. How you doing? Hi there, Priscilla. How you doing?
Hi, Mike.
How's everything? What do you think? You all set? You need help? Make sure we're good. Okay, we're recording. Priscilla, you going to show? Oh no, why is my? Oh, you are. Oh, it is. Okay, you going to show slides, Priscilla?
Mike, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't think you can hear me. Can you hear me?
No, Um,
I'm just trying to get to the ATAC seminar. Is this right? Yeah. You are on your seminar. Thank you. And then I just click on the link. Hey, everybody. Around 11 o'clock. Okay. I'm good. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Uh-oh. You can't. Uh-oh. You can, Lillian, thank you. At least you can hear me. Uh-oh. I think it's you.
all right, well, I'm going to get going. And I want to thank everybody for coming and for New Jersey for hosting this event. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and this is where I usually fall into the Zoom, I don't know, circular drain whenever I share my screen. So if things go wrong, just bear with me. I should be able to do this by now, but nah, doesn't always work. So let's try, see what I can do. How's it looking, guys? Great. All right, so we're going to, I'm going to get back to the beginning. And I am really, you know, I've been doing lectures for a long time. And one of the things that I still do for presentations is I have a tendency to overproduce here. So if I do, I apologize. I may be moving pretty quickly. And if anybody has a question, please submit them. I don't see the chat during my presentation, but I can stop or somebody can unmute themselves and please jump in. Okay. I don't have any financial agreement or benefiting from any app or company. So let's get that out of the way. All right, personal narratives or telling a story. Storytelling has a substantial history in the field of speech language pathology and in classrooms. It is a way for students, it is something that seems to develop naturally in students by listening and engaging other individuals and adults as well as children. It generally starts out as a personal narrative, story about themselves. And then over time, it begins to morph into fantasy, pretend. When my son was small, I always said he had a great future as somebody who would work with white collar criminals because he could tell, I called them lies. He just outright made everything up. And whenever I would go to school, the nuns would gather around me and inform me of all the things that were wrong with me, that were going on in our family, that there were dinosaurs buried in the backyard, so-and-so had passed away. None of this was true. And I had clients who would come. I had a private practice when he was small, and my big playroom was outside my office. And my clients, some of them would come only to sit next to this little kid and listen to the tales that he told. It was probably a good measure of where he was going to go intellectually. He was a pretty smart guy. However, he did retain that ability to tell tales all through high school. And as an adult, I think sometimes he cringes now and thinks that he did that. But that is how children develop. They begin to talk about fantasy. They begin to, create emotions and things like that. And the story doesn't necessarily have to have a resolution. And lots of times when we're having children build storytelling skills, we want a resolution. No, you don't have to have one. You can just tell a story, and you can, the kiddo can explore feelings, events, situations, and you could end it with, that sounds really interesting, rather than there having to be something that happens at the end. The other thing about storytelling and narratives is that it allows the child to move away from themselves into a variety of settings. And if you're somebody who works with individuals who use AAC, you already are beginning to recognize this is very often not how individuals engage young children who have AAC. There's a lot of things we do that don't facilitate storytelling. So one of the things that narratives do is that they force a child, or they enable a child to build and integrate all of their cognitive skills, their linguistic skills, and their social skills. They have to look at you. They have to put in prosody and meta information. They have to be able to start at the beginning and then move to the end. They're building connections. They're developing how to interact with somebody and keep their attention. This typically develops by grade 1. If it is a skill that doesn't develop by grade 1, sorry, my chair keeps getting into ruts in the carpet. We have a smaller office here, and there's carpeting, and it's driving me insane, and I haven't been able to get the contractor out to do it. So I look like I'm really uncomfortable. I apologize. But if the child has not developed it by first grade, typically you will see consequences in their language development, okay? And also what happens when children begin to tell stories is that our conversational partners begin to support us. Yeah. Then what happened? Oh, really? So we begin to support the individual's language development by modeling turn taking and the kind of vocabulary we can get. And eventually, as I said, the child begins to add characters, events, and go beyond the immediate and the present, and themselves as well. This is when a child develops a narrative. This is also a way of building confidence about themselves, about their abilities. It also facilitates literacy, how stories make sense. We have all those pre-literacy skills that we teach children about this, the cover of the book, who wrote the book, the author, the illustrations, how to turn pages. And it's the same kind of sequential learning that happens when we tell narratives, happens when we're reading stories. And again, the child is developing a sense of self and integrating their cognitive skills into that sense of self as they begin to tell stories, true or not, about themselves. The child doesn't have to have excellent syntactic or semantic skills. They might substitute one word for another. They might not put all of the verb forms in the correct style. But because storytelling is collaborative, and that's just the way stories go. If a friend of yours is telling a story, you maintain eye contact, you make aha, you say yes, and it's a collaborative kind of effort, either encouraging or discouraging. And partners will support by the errors that the child makes by modeling that corrected model just automatically. It also helps children with summarizing, which is a linguistic skill that will benefit them as they begin to develop reading skills, because that's something we often ask kiddos, is to identify, the characters, the who, the what, the where, and then summarize what they read, so that we know that they are learning and processing. So narrative storytelling is often used as an intervention in language therapy or in reading therapy. It supports students who have language disorders. It supports the development of literacy, how sentences develop, how paragraphs develop. And it also supports those students who present learning disabilities, okay? When I was working in the public schools, I worked with a young man who presented autism. And at the end of 5th grade, mom said she had one request, that he learn to write. He was a very verbal young man, but he used a computer, but he refused to write. We began, at that point, students were using portable keyboards. And so I gave him one of these, I think a Neo at that time, because it was portable, it wouldn't break, we could bring it into therapy, he wasn't going to get lost on the page. And he began writing and writing and writing. As soon as he understood that he had a voice, he just took off. And I can't remember how I introduced it to him. I know we did some turn taking. I know I did some modeling, but I don't remember the very specific. But what happened is he began writing about the games he was playing on the computer. And for a year, he could not switch off. He could only write about one thing. Now, he wanted me to listen. He would love to read them to me. He wanted me to listen. He wanted me to understand, but he could write about one thing. Even when I backed up the therapy process to the point where I would say, here's a picture. I'm going to start the story. Now it's your turn. And I would explain the process. I would create the parameters for the activity. I would write them down so they were reminders. As soon as I stopped writing or talking, he went immediately back to writing about what he did as a game player. So the narrative process, the storytelling process evolved for him, but he could not make that leap very easily. He eventually did. I did not continue with him after the 6th grade. Another therapist began to work with him. But what he began and got stuck on for a while was that personal narrative. And I wasn't really a part of it. And he wasn't developing that theory of mind as much as I would like him to. But I could very succinctly see what his writing looked like, where he was having breakdowns in language. And I could also support those with structure tasks. And then the next therapist really worked on helping him make the jump from the personal narrative. But that was really difficult for him. And it wasn't because literacy wasn't a part of his home. He came from a family where reading books to each other was really, really important. It was just where he got stuck. He has a language disordered child, and that is where he got stuck. So narratives build those language skills. I talked about that. It facilitates conversation. We want to tell somebody something. It helps build grammar and grammar structures, how words go together. It requires the use of vocabulary for the individual to begin using a variety of vocabulary words in order to get their intent across. They will want to retell the story. And if you interrupt Or you say, I thought you said, they'll correct you, they'll retell it, they'll try to bring cohesion into it, they'll organize it. And all of this goes on, all of this goes on as part of the story building process. Okay. It also gets them to step outside of themselves. Okay. I don't see the closed captioning and I'm becoming concerned. Hopefully you are seeing it. But if you look at narratives and storytelling, there are multiple things that will enter into it. Emotion that is important to that child. What is relevant? If the kiddo goes off on a tangent, they're going to lose you. And kiddos, as you know, they could tell when you're not paying attention. They got that. And they'll pull your face back. Are you listening to me? Those kinds of things. Again, as I'm talking about narratives, you can begin to understand how this doesn't always work for individuals who use AAC. They can't grab your face. They aren't being encouraged to always talk about their feelings. They have to talk about events, whether they are coming up or whether they have already passed, okay? I did say you don't have to have a resolution, but when you're telling a story, sometimes kids will end it with, and that's what happened. And that's it. That's all. And so they're putting a cap on it, and that's their resolution. It may not be a true resolution, but it is to them. They're telling about a personal moment that might have happened to them. It might be intertwined with fantasy, but somehow it relates to them. They're developing cohesion, how to bring pieces of a story together. And they have specific reference, the her, the she, the they, the my dog, the dinosaur, the man who drove the giant truck down all of a sudden we are making reference to specific things and people and events. And we're developing logical storytelling, beginning, middle, and end, so that it makes sense to the listener. So users of AAC have challenges. I'm trying to keep track of time. Users of AAC have challenges that don't facilitate storytelling. The partner dominates the conversation. We talk at individuals who use AAC. They have limited opportunities for storytelling. I, as a therapist working with AAC users, I've been working with one woman a young woman for several years now on trying to develop stories. And we could get 1 or 2 turns and we couldn't get beyond that. So we backed up and we worked on building grammar, building awareness of when to use different grammar, building adjectives, building vocabulary, exploring relationships between words. And we had to do that first. And because she just didn't feel comfortable in her own AAC skin. And now, because of the pandemic, when my husband is here, he will say, I can really hear a difference in her sentences. They're interesting. They have cohesion. He says, and I've been listening to her for a long time. And now we are beginning to get into storytelling, and she is beginning to make requests of her attendants that are new and different and create events in their joint lives. And so the storytelling is evolving. Very often individuals who use AAC get a lot of yes/no questions, closed-ended questions, and we're not really feeling the authentic individual. Now with young children, we may see that with behavioral outburst. That's authentic. But we're not, we don't always stop with, you know, that makes me angry when you do that, as a therapy approach. And let's take it a step further. How does it feel when you do it? How do you feel? And we very often don't do that with them. Often AAC users rely on the communication partner for the information and they don't take the lead. I want my AAC users to know you own this device, you own this conversation, and there's a limited amount of stuff that I'm going to do for you. Because I only get you for a short period of time. And if I don't empower you, I'm not doing you any favors. Empowering has therapeutic components, building vocabulary, developing core, developing sequencing, but you have to start a conversation. The individual's vocabulary may be limited as they're an emerging communicator, or they don't use the vocabulary on their device very well, or they use shortened utterances. These are all things that we can work on therapeutically that will facilitate storytelling and the development of narratives. However, as you will see as we go on, they don't have to be perfectly in place for them to work. So some additional challenges for AAC. They'll have difficulty introducing that new information, that thing I was just talking about. I will start all of my sessions with adults with, tell me something that happened in your life this week. I could tell you a ton of stuff about mine, but I want to hear about yours. And that immediately puts the burden on them to tell me something new. And sometimes it's repetitive, and then other times I am hearing about their life. I am hearing about something that they experienced or felt. Because they don't have a lot of experience with oral storytelling, their stories may seem disorganized and it might not make sense to them. And so that temporal and that spatial and all the references, that cohesion isn't there for them innately. They haven't been getting the models and they haven't been getting the opportunities to develop the skills. They might have behaviors that are getting in the way. They might have cognitive issues that are getting in the way of development. And these are things that you will be very aware of through a very good assessment, reading of progress notes, and you will know where you have to back up and what you have to introduce. Many AAC users are emerging communicators and do not have strong conversational skills. Children who present apraxia and are using AAC as augmentative tools, very often their utterance length is shortened because of intelligibility. They have to learn to rely on their device as an augmentative tool and for partners to let it become an augmentative tool. And so their conversational skills are continuing to emerge, perhaps beyond that first grade level. And so these are the challenges that our AAC users will face. So what are some things that make narratives really work well with the AAC user? Well, it allows for collaboration with teachers and family members, even if it's just going through the story with them afterwards. You're developing shared interest. You're creating meaning for that child, where before we were just focused on finding the symbols, navigating the device, using the core. We are now making all of that a little bit more meaningful. When you are working with individuals who use AAC, you can do some of the very same things that you might do in therapy with kiddos who are language disordered and you're building narratives. You build scaffolding in, you might do mapping. And the person with mapping of ideas, the AAC user might only have to access one symbol and you fill in the map or you do, mind mapping on the computer or the tablet, and then you fill it in. And then you scaffold, you start building from those single words. Well, now they've input into the story. Maybe it's only at the one word level, but they've input. You could use the visual cues that are very common to them, their daily schedules. You can use pictures from morning activities. You can use pictures that come in from home that are on their device. Because so many devices, I think most all devices now have real-time cameras. If you go through the pictures on a kiddo's tablet or device, very often you'll see a bunch of pictures that are really relevant to them. You can use those. You can set it up so that you're asking them some open-ended questions and asking for comments like, what would you say if, those kinds of things. You can give binary choices so that the individual begins to make choices about what might be alternatives. You can use gestures and visual prompts. You can show somebody, you can go through the act of pouring tea and mixing it, and you can do all that right there with the individual. They don't have to do it, but you can do it. You can use sentence prompts, and some of the online tools are very, very useful for developing sentence prompts and using them that will allow you to, the student maybe can finish, or the user can finish the sentence with 1, 2, and then increasing. With my AAC users, very often I will say, if we're working on sentence development, I put limits, just as I do when I'm working with middle schoolers. I need a sentence with these 2 words and have at least this many words in it, so that they're starting to develop the concept of complex language. The individual doesn't have to be independent. Yes, the individual who is completely verbal is an independent storyteller, but you can facilitate that person using AAC. They don't have to be 100% independent. And every activity where you're encouraging them to make choices is you're facilitating choice making. And that's part of why we want them on AAC, to be a functional communicator, to make choices, to communicate needs, to tell us what they're feeling. Okay? So you can use information that's readily available, their picture schedule, song boards, okay? These are the songs that you seem to sing in morning group. Which one should we talk about? Which one did you sing this morning? You can have pictures that relate to group activities. If they're doing mindfulness and they're watching yoga on the smart board, you can have a picture of yoga, and then you can have pictures of somebody in different positions. So you can refer back to what has happened. You can refer to people in their lives using those pictures, okay? So what I'm trying to get across to you is how what develops naturally and what we begin to do naturally with kiddos who are oral, helping individuals who use AAC to do the same thing, only we're doing a little bit more scaffolding, okay? Talk about feelings. And this is a challenge for some students who use AAC. Even some of my adults who have known me for a long time will still try to please me. No, that's not your job. Your job's not to make me happy. If I say, did you work on literacy this week? And you say, yes, I read and all of a sudden mom's head comes into the screen and says, she hasn't done any of that. And the person has to be able to talk about their feelings. I'm embarrassed when you asked me, or I have one client who will say, whose face says, if you give me homework, I'll probably vomit right here in front of you. And I know from her facial expressions, she doesn't want homework. Part of her journey is to explain to me her feelings about homework. And that's tough. She can give me the facial expression, but I want her to talk about the feelings. And that can be a story in itself. You can use visual aspects, and that's the nifty thing about online tools, is everything can be visual very quickly. And then use photos that are very relevant to the individual. It builds all those cohesive things. So you want to develop some linguistic complexity, increase the utterance length and form and content. You want to be sure that the words you're going to need are on the student's or individual speech generating device. If they're an emerging communicator, very often I start my AAC users out with a pretty robust vocabulary. However, not all schools do that. And so you want to make sure that core and that fringe vocabulary is there so you can reinforce the linguistic and cognitive development. You want to make sure that you have joint attention. Okay, it's going to take longer. So maybe we just make a 2-picture story, or maybe we come back to it tomorrow. You want the individual to understand why are we doing this? Excuse me. And is it an event that's familiar to the child? And if you are a proponent of using core, and I think many of us are now, you want to use the words that are within the core vocabulary, but start increasing the breadth of the vocabulary usage. Even though they may have a robust vocabulary, they may not use it fully, okay? I still have an adult client who she knows that very often I'm working on a Mac and I don't have an emulator right in front of me. And if I say I can tell her where the word is on her system, and she uses a very complex system, she will still deny that word's on her system. And so I'll go back and when session is over and I can get on an emulator and you know, but even the next week I'll go, okay, it's under, you know, it's where weight and heavy. Nope, that word doesn't exist. She'll deny. And so that joint attention helps you to say, wow, I didn't know that wasn't on here. You know, could I just try to find that word? And you're going to build vocabulary. You want to work at the level of the individual. You may be expanding utterance length, but you don't want to tax them so they feel that they are failing. What's in their repertoire right now? And make sure that fringe vocabulary is there. Sometimes we get so focused on the core, we don't recognize that fringe vocabulary can be very motivating. You're trying to build mastery of a skill. Mastery does not mean long utterances, complex utterances. It means that you model them so that the individual can get there. I'm going to skip over this next part because I've already talked about that and it's a bit redundant. Okay. Some of the nice things about online tools is that you can save them to the speech generating device, to the tablet, to the computer, to the cloud. And then they can be downloaded and accessed at home or by the teacher. There are multiple apps now that are very useful. But don't forget some of the standards, the oldies and goodies. Multiple age levels. Narratives are something that emerge from infancy and develop into adulthood. My husband says, you could tell a great story, Priscilla. However, it seems to become embellished every time you do. Well, I see that as I just am getting better at telling the story. He recognizes it for what it is. I'm making it more interesting. I'm an adult. And so you can do this at various age levels. And many apps will reflect that, okay? And the complexity of the sentences can vary. They can be a sentence starter. And you can move from a very personal narrative to something that happened in the past or something that is pretend. And getting that pretend is totally cool. So here are the things that the partner should be modeling. And modeling is something that is for us as therapists and teachers, we've become very good at it. Within the concepts of aided language input, we've taken this very seriously. This is sometimes more difficult for others interacting with the child. Para-educators sometimes are not very comfortable with it. Teachers sometimes are not, but that doesn't mean that it's just unfamiliar. Individuals who might be working with someone in the home are not always good with modeling, but we need to be modeling all of these things, the vocabulary. We need to be modeling emotions. We need to be modeling, introducing different stories. What is the most important thing about that story? You know, was the most important thing that we almost fell off the steps, or was the most important thing that we had to get someone to help us, and you as the AAC user wouldn't stop laughing? What was most important? I could tell you what was most important to me when I thought we were going to end up on the concrete. What was most important to you is how funny it was. That is important to my user, okay? And you can model the routines and how we go through routines. And very often, children who use AAC have routines in their day. Some of this I have talked about already, but the open-ended question and prompts, you want to allow the child to hear other people telling a story, not just an instructional activity. And if they're able to write, some of the clicker tools are excellent for writing and developing stories. Let the child, participate in the writing process. And then can they go back and look at them later? Okay, so they can tell it to somebody else. Maybe what they're going to say on their AAC system is, look, you look here, okay? And the individual then will look, and you are building language complexity. So here are some of the things that I talked about didn't happen with AAC users: initiating conversation, responding to reading, not just drifting off into the ether, developing transitions, I take a turn, you take a turn, because, conjunctions, those kinds of things, taking turns, which is hard to do when you're an AAC user, and learn to do that well. And then develop reciprocity, okay? Those are important things. You have to make it meaningful for the individual. Stay positive, stay encouraging, model for the caregiver. Don't be afraid to model more than once. And the goal, as with all AAC use, is independence. I'd like for you to be able to do this on your own. That doesn't mean I'm going to throw you out there to the wolves, but that's my goal. So let's look at some online tools that I think are accessible and are readily available to some people, and then others that have some cost. Tools that you can use are Boardmaker. And I love Boardmaker, but Boardmaker, I didn't have to make this one. This is available to you, that you can set up a story script. You can develop videos using Boardmaker symbols, put them into the video. So as the video is going on, you can tell the symbols will come up. So you can create the video, and then the student can then begin to, on their system, access the symbols that go with what part of the story is in that video. And then you can put those symbols into the video. And when the kiddo plays it for someone else, or someone plays it with them, there are their symbols. And now we can go to the system. Now we can use 2 words. Now we can continue building. Lesson Picks is another picture resource, and they, Lesson Picks, let's see if they have small picture books, and they have a lot of, just like Boardmaker, they have resources that will get you going. Lesson Picks also has a sharing center, and it can be a wonderful resource. There is a charge, a fee for Lesson Picks. It's not very much, and it has some wonderful, wonderful resources. And you can build that library, and then the student can, okay, so here we have these things that are going to be in our story, and the individual, you're building the story, and the individual is finding them on their AAC, and you can reduce how much support you give them. That's scaffolding. Excuse me, I have to go back. Make-believe comics, it has been around for a long time, and Bill Zimmerman designed a wonderful tool. Make-believe comics, if you are not familiar with it, now I've lost my mouse, it has tutorials, and it's a lot of fun. I use make-believe comics all the way through undergraduate classes. For students to understand. And you can see, you can let the individual pick the character, alligator, and then, well, I don't know what I would call that. And then maybe you could start the sentence and they can finish it. You can export these stories, you can, and it's free. It does have ads. But it's you can create a PowerPoint book. You can email them right to home. Mom can look at them, or dad can look at them at work, at home, and then they can talk about it when the kiddo gets home. Okay, so that is an online tool, and it's a very valuable one that will also go across ages. Powtoons is a tool that I've begun using to create stories. And I started doing it when I was in private practice. Now that I'm teaching full time, I haven't gotten back into it, but I'm going to be using it as a teaching tool for my students since I've already paid for it. It can be quite costly. It might be something that you write a grant for. But Powtoons is a tool that is used in industry, and so it will go across age levels. And it comes with a lot of resources. You can bring in your own pictures, you can add music, and the cost of it reflects what you can add. But it can be a wonderful thing, which you can then upload to YouTube. And it transitions great. It's one of my favorite storytelling tools, as well as a tool that I use for information, to get information to families. But it does have a cost. At $19, you can only do 5 exports per month, but this may be something you work on over a monthly period, and you're not needing to have the very costly one, something that maybe a PTA will support, and that can be uploaded to a district website. So it really, I like it. I like that it comes from the business world, and we're showing the user that it can be complex. PowerPoint, you can build in narrations, add music, put symbols in, use Board Maker, you can use the Pass software, you can download symbols from the speech generating device companies, and then you can create books, you can run the story as on its own with timing. It's on all computers, on most, you can put it on a tablet. So it's an oldie but goodie, but it's great for building stories. You can have in the up here in this part of the screen in the title bar, you could have your sentence starter, down here your picture, and then over here where you're going to put your symbols, and you create the story. I'm going quickly now. Tar Heel Reader. You can write a book in Tar Heel Reader, or you can read a book. And the neat thing about Tar Heel Reader is that it is about emerging literacy. However, there are some wonderful clinicians now who are beginning to develop stories of books for older students who are emerging readers. And so your older clients using AAC can get it won't feel so young. However, you can read them, they can be read to you, it can be automated, you can use it for a variety of ages, and Tar Heel Reader will tell you, show you with their own little book, which it will automate how to create a story. So you don't have to be the only, you don't have to do it. You have to get a code from them to write a story, but if you email them and they'll send you the code for that. But it's a very good one. It's also an oldie but goodie. People overlook it a lot, but it's a really great way to build stories. And you can import your own pictures. Pictello. Pictello is readily available on the tablet. Assistiveware has done a really nice job of making Pictello very nice to use. It's very good for older students. You can import, you can create your visual schedules and then work from there. And there are multiple videos about Pictello that you can access. And as you can see in this video, they are using Pictello with older students. And I know sometimes when we're thinking about stories telling and narratives, we're thinking younger students. No, our students who use AAC, many times we are developing these skills for older students. Excuse me, I've got to get back into my Snapscene by Toby Dynavox. It creates the hotspots, and this could be a really nice way of working with those individuals who are developing vocabulary. Snapscene has so many uses, but by having that one picture, we can create those hotspots and then tell a story about it. If I have my toy house and I take a picture of all the different rooms, then I can create hotspots. I can use my device to create either the use of vocabulary for my system, or I can, tell a story, and I can put that right into Snapscene. Again, this has a cost, but Snapscene also has tutorials. Sorry, I lose my mouse. For using it and for developing for different ways of using Snapscene. And I'm also trying to give you a variety of tools from a variety of makers or developers.
It's an app.
You can show this to your parents. You can show this to your user. And I know hotspots are very often used with younger emerging vocabulary children who are developing vocabulary. But older individuals for whom some of the sequencing is complex might do very, very well with this. Book Creator, it will read to you. This does have a cost. It's, people who develop these wonderful apps need to make a living. And there are subscription services. The thing about Book Creator is that it will read it to you. You can create your story, and then the child doesn't have to go back and use their system to read it. It will be read to them through the Book Creator app. And this is on the app on the tablet. It does have a cost, but again, you can use all those scaffolding tools to make a complex tool very usable. Clicker Books. I would encourage all of you to investigate, if you haven't, and you probably have. I apologize if I'm preaching to the choir. The Crick tools. The Clicker Books, Clicker Docs. You can use all of the scaffolding tools for storytelling within these apps. and you can use them interchangeably. You can use them for different parts of the storytelling process. And then you can, they actually have a book that, an app for creating books. But the clicker tools are wonderful. They aren't very expensive. You buy them once, they're not a subscription. They're not very expensive for each one, and they have a lot of resources. You can also get this as a tool on your computer and can be used in the classroom, so that we can now make storytelling a classroom activity on the whiteboard. And we can have story starters, we can have errorless writing. All of these things are tools we need to be doing with our students who have complex disabilities, and at the same time be building their narrative skills. I find that these tools, again, my app, these tools, my mouse, can be very useful with teachers. And I find I'm getting referrals for them from teachers more and more. I also find that when I introduce them into a classroom, the teacher then starts asking for it the next year. And finally, don't forget what's available on the device itself if you're using a dedicated system. Visual scenes that you can introduce symbols into, and you can build a story with that. Individual apps, PRs, I don't like to recommend one app over another. Everybody has their favorites, but AAC developers are really focusing a lot on how to build core and how to enable individuals to become more independent. And so use the tools that are built into the device. One of my clients loves notebooks, but very often her notebooks don't resemble her writing. And when she wanted to write a Mother's Day card to her mom, and she wanted it in a notebook. And it was really important to me that she understand that that notebook, when mom opened it, or she opened it for her mom, she navigates very well on her own, it reflected her thoughts. And while the caretaker in the home watched the session and how we got started, she then finished it. And it became very, very important to this user that this story, this card, represent her thoughts about her mom. Where previously her notebooks were the standard, hello, my name is, I live at, I do this, I use. This was now about emotions. This was about expressing her love and thanking her mom. It was very, very powerful. And that's all. I'm over time. I'm going to stop sharing. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. I don't see anything in the chat. Oh, I do. Oh, tons of stuff in the chat. It's over here on the side. Thanks, guys. I will post the handout. The comments about lesson picks, make-believe comics. Yes, Google Slides. I apologize. Google Slides is another great tool for integrating symbols. I apologize for not being a strong opportunity. Clicker apps are really very useful, and they go across platforms. I will share the handout. Please understand that all of the information on the handouts are research from reading. They are not my own studies, or I do a lot of reading before I do the presentation. So I'm not the originator of all of these ideas, just the therapy experiences. So I appreciate everybody listening, and I appreciate your time and attention, and I will share the handout. I have to figure out how to do that, but it will be done. Have a great day, guys. Bye.